and we'll get this meeting started. I'm Councilmember Jose Huizar. I'm joined by Councilmember Koretz. This is a meeting, a joint special meeting between the Energy and Environment Committee and the Ad hoc on Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee. Mr. Koretz and I are here for the Energy and Environment Committee. For the Ad hoc Committee, myself and Koretz are also present. We are expecting the chair of the Ad hoc Committee, Mr. Alarcon, to arrive shortly, and Mr. Labange from the Energy and Environment Committee should arrive shortly as well. But with that, why don't we call to order the Energy and Environment Committee, and we could ask if it's okay with my colleague as he sits down and looks at his notes. The consent items?
Certainly. Bobby Operator with the CLA's office.
Oh, yeah, the consent items are. Let's do item number 2, please.
Okay.
3, 4, and 5. If the CLA can read those into the record, please.
Sure. Item number 3 relates to DWP report. CAO report relative to proposed amendment number 1 to the contract with Griffith Company for construction of the Van Norman chloramation station. Item number 4 relates to DWP report and CAO report as well. Agreement with Vista Towers for lease of approximately 2,400 square feet, Crowley Lake, Mono County, California. And number 5 relates to DWP report and resolution relative to agreement with Wild Rose Geothermal Energy Project with SCAPA as well. Those that covers 3 through 5.
Thank you. And my colleagues, if it's okay, we put 3, 4, and 5 on consent for the Energy and Environment Committee?
Sure.
Okay, so those items will be moved forward on consent without objection. We have one more item in the Energy and Environment Committee. It's item number 2. If you could call that to order, please.
Item number 2, Bureau of Sanitation report relative to appeal, Board of Public Works sewer service charge adjustment termination for the property at 3246 Pueblo Avenue.
Okay, this item is a adjustment determination for this property. I understand we couldn't put it on consent, need to take action on it, so if it's okay with my colleagues, we'll all move this forward without objection. Okay.
Is the action to grant the appeal?
The action is to grant the appeal, yes.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Did you want to hear it?
No,
somebody was.
So this means that she will get it.
She would get that reduced from her bill. Yes.
She'll
There's an overcharge on a bill.
Yeah.
The city overcharged, the DWP overcharged someone.
She had limited authority, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we'll move that forward. 3, 4, and 5 consent. Number 2 will be moved forward without objection. So this brings us to the joint committee between the Energy and Environment Committee and the Ad hoc Waste Reduction and Recycling Committee. And may you read item number 1 to the record, please.
Item number 1, continue from February 20th. Bureau of Sanitation report relative to the preliminary implementation plan for the exclusive commercial multifamily solid waste franchising hauling system.
Okay.
We have staff from Bureau of Sanitation.
Okay, these are...
Good afternoon, Honorable Chair Huizar, Honorable Chair Alarcon, Honorable Council Member Koretz. I'm Alex Helou. I'm the Assistant Director for the City of Los Angeles Bureau of Sanitation. Our Director, Enrique Zaldivar, wanted to be here this afternoon, but is currently in a meeting with the Mayor. On November 2012, the Council selected the exclusive franchise system as a mechanism to move the city from landfills towards zero waste, increase recycling, and implement clean fuel vehicles. In addition, Council directed Sanitation to begin the EIR process and design the implementation plan. On February 20th, 2013, the notice of EIR preparation was issued. City staff hired CH2M Hill to perform the EIR. 7 stakeholders meetings have been conducted between March 4 through March 14, 2013. They've been conducted throughout the city. Outreach was done to residents, businesses, nonprofit organizations, and environmental groups. Many organizations attended this meeting and provided valuable input. The EIR process is scheduled to be completed by February 2014. Due to the complexity nature and to ensure continuous feedback and input from all stakeholders, especially council offices, haulers, studios, and hospitals, the implementation plan has been divided into 3 parts. The first part was presented and discussed on February 20th, 2013. Your committees provided us with valuable information that we utilized to define the number and the size of the zones, market share, and service level, and this information will be presented today. We will present the final plan on April 17. That will include your input from today, as well as the rate structure and our recommendation for the service requirements for the studios and hospitals. As we are working on the implementation plan, we have been meeting with multiple stakeholders, including haulers, studios, and hospitals. In addition, we have visited other exclusive franchise cities and gathered data from the haulers that will help us define the road ahead. Finally, I would like to thank all our stakeholders and the council deputies, especially Martin Schlegeter, Matt Hale, Andy Schrader, Lisa Shatner, and John De La Rosa for their valuable input and guidance in this process. I'll turn it over to our Board of Public Works Commissioner Maddox.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, council members, and particularly Councilman Weezar and Councilman Alarcon. Thank you so much for this opportunity. As you know, this is the Implementation Plan 2.0. We'd like to thank Enrique in his absence, of course, Alex, Karen, Coca, Dan Myers, and our fellow commissioners. Is this mic on? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Okay.
is that mic on?
Speak closer to it.
Yeah, you probably just be close to it.
I'd like to also acknowledge our fellow commissioners here. I believe we have Commissioner Nutter here, who's been working on this project for nearly 2 years, and we also have Commissioner Mendoza that has been working very diligently on our environmental components. As you know, we have our same goals that we're looking to move forward on. I'll run down the list very quickly for you. A zero waste goal of 90% diversion by year 2025. As you know, we're well ahead of schedule on that. We're going to meet and exceed the California environmental laws, improve health and safety for solid waste workers. We're also going to move forward with improving efficiency and reducing collection routes, improve air quality, and reduce greenhouse gases. And that would be through our clean fuel vehicles. The other opportunity is to meet customer needs with uniform rates and cutting-edge programs, foster long-term competition, and create a stabilized service fees. The items that we're going to cover specifically today, members, is we're going to look at our franchise zone map. It's a proposed map at this time, the market share cap. We're also going to look at our material exemptions, facility certification, initiative timeline updates, and we also are going to talk about some of our upcoming items, which would be rates, fees, funding requirements, contingency plans, special services, and particularly our hospital and studios issue. We're not where we want to be, as they say in church, but we're not where we used to be. We are moving forward with this item, and I'm very pleased with the stakeholders that have come to the table to support us in this process and provide much-needed information. We have met with the Motion Picture Association, hospitals, small to large haulers. We've also worked with folks from the Apartment Association, churches, the Don't Waste LA Coalition, and the NRDC. And what we plan to do here, and the most important thing is in the implementation of this, council members, is we need to make sure that we do it once, do it right, do it once, coming out of the box. And we are moving forward with this. And I'd like to turn it over at this time to Dan Myers. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dan Myers, Bureau of Sanitation. I have prepared a short presentation. I'll go through it quickly. I know these meetings usually are very well attended. The Board Commissioner Maddox actually did a very good job of going over what's going to highlight today in our presentation. That little background, the goals of that were laid out in the initial version of the plan remain unchanged and just further go to support the discussions for today. Specifically for this version, as Commissioner Maddox pointed out, we have about 6 or 7 items that are new to version 2 of the plan, and I'll be going through each of the new items to the plan. Start off with actually a piece that a lot of people have been wondering about. It's how how the city would be divided up into commercial franchise zones so that we could, award contracts. The city is recommending that we designate 11 franchise zones in the city. Specifically, our recommendation is to adopt the map as shown in the plan, which designates 11 zones throughout the city and 3 zones of those 11 set aside for small haulers. When we started the process of dividing the city into zones, we had to start with just some base assumptions of how we're going to develop those. The first basis was we used the city's existing waste sheds. The Bureau has 6 waste sheds. We use those as a base to divide the city up. We also use the major features such as roads and geography such as mountains in drawing the zone boundaries. This provides clear and distinct boundaries for customers, the city, and the franchise haulers to provide the service. Again, the city's proposing 11 zones. We believe the 11 zones provide opportunities for multiple haulers, allows for the potential bundling of zones. That's where we would take potentially multiple zones and award them to a single contractor, allows for small hauler participation, and also allows to, or minimizes the administrative burden by providing a pool of local haulers. A lot of discussion has been on, well, what's going to be the size of the zones? When we look at the size of the zones, you can look at them in multiple fashions. We've looked at it by the number of accounts, the level of service. When I say level of service, that's cubic yards per week of service. So if a business has a 3-yard bin picked up once a week, that would be 3 cubic yards of service. Sanitation mainly focused on the use of the accounts and level of service in establishing the zones. One of the first things we did when drawing the zone boundaries was figure out how to address small haulers in the development of the zones. We've set aside 3 small zones. They're located near Clark's. They were Clark's is our City of Los Angeles own transfer and recycling facility. This was done to help remove the concern that larger competitors, waste haulers, would not offer competitive rates to smaller haulers. By locating them next to a publicly owned facility, we were able to offer them, even level rates that everybody gets. Also, near our Clark's facility, there are multiple other privately owned transfer stations, so it gives the small haulers many opportunities for transfer. We also know through self-reporting of the haulers that many of the small haulers collect less than 1,000 counts. And when surveyed, many of the small haulers indicated that the small zones should be sized around the 2,000 account range. So in establishing the zones, the small zones, we have the smallest zones at around 1,200 accounts, representing about 7,100 cubic yards of service per week. The largest of the 3 is at 2,300 accounts and 1,700 cubic yards per week of service. To protect the interest of the small haulers, these zones will not be included in the bundling. Talked a little bit earlier that we potentially take zones and combine them through the award and during the award of the contracts. These zones would be set aside so they wouldn't be part of that bundling to continue to support the small haulers. And the small haulers will have additional opportunity under the city's business inclusion plan. The larger size zones actually vary in size as the small zones. They range between 4,200 accounts, around 21,000 cubic yards of service per week, to 12,000 accounts at 72,000 cubic yards a week. This allows the larger haulers to actually utilize their existing infrastructure and capital to provide competitive proposals. The varied size zones, again, allows the cities to bundle and combine zones in the RFP process. This combining these zones The idea behind it is that we have the opportunity to potentially combine zones that have disproportional rates to help level the rates across those zones. It also ensures all zones receive competitive proposals. If a hauler wants a larger market share, they'll have to propose on areas that may appear to be less profitable. It also limits any single hauler market share. We also, through the process, there was discussion as far as should the city look at capping the market share that any single waste hauler would have. Currently, the city is recommending that there be a 40% cap on market share. The exact market share will have to be determined through and during the RFP and contract process. Right now, those the zones are set aside or allocated based upon a market share of either service level or number of accounts. Again, that information has been self-reported to the haulers, and we further refined through the RFP process. We also know that although we're recommending a cap of 40%, minor modifications to this rate may have to be made during the RFP process as we learn more about the exact market share of each individual zone. This cap, the cap will help ensure that no single hauler will dominate in the city, and that there will be a sufficient pool of qualified waste haulers to meet the current and future collection and diversion needs, foster growth, and maintain competition. It also allows the city to effectively arrange for backup waste haulers if a waste hauler is unable to fulfill its contractual obligation. And under the current permit system, no single hauler has more than 40% of the market share currently. We did want to bring forward some of the exemption discussions when it comes to facilities are being held until next discussion. We did want to bring the recommendation to exempt certain material types, specifically medical waste, hazardous waste, radioactive waste, pharmaceutical, construction and demolition debris, recyclables that have value to the generator, and green waste that is removed from a site incidental to a landscaper's business, and other specialty waste designated by the sanitation, such as biosolids, fats, oils, and grease. There was a discussion during our meeting last time on facility certification. We, based on that discussion, we went back and did further analysis on the certification. We're currently recommending that the city certify and inspect all facilities as part of the contracts. The city will have the right to inspect facilities for compliance with all the appropriate rules and regulations. The city will have the authority to inspect all the waste haulers' facilities, their yards, and their own facilities, in addition to certifying and inspecting all waste and recycling facilities utilized under contract. Sanitation will establish a team of highly trained inspectors, establish sufficient staffing to perform regular inspections and respond to complaints, and establish a complaint hotline. We've also included in this version a timeline that highlights some of the we consider to be major functions and milestones to fully develop the franchise the franchise initiative. To highlight some of those, we're expecting that the CEQA and ordinance process completed in early 2014. Upon that completion, we would issue our RFP. We'd actually start developing the RFP as soon as we get through the implementation plan process, what we're in right now. And with that, we'd imagine that upon releasing the RFP, we'd have 24 months to evaluate and develop contracts. This would bring us back to our Board of Public Works for recommendation in early 2016. with the goal of beginning service in early 2017. And as part of that implementation plan, there's also what we know is going to have to be a transition period. When we award the contracts, we know that there's many items that are going to have to be addressed before service can actually begin. We're proposing a 2-year transition period. This is necessary to implement all the components of the franchise agreement, and it can ensure all customer needs are met throughout the process. Again, this will begin on the award of the contract. Some of the long lead items that we are anticipating is the purchase of clean fuel vehicles and the purchasing of bins. We know that customer accounts and billing databases will need to be developed before service can begin. And other elements such as the full rollout of recycling will actually be able to phase in over the full 2-year transition period. We're anticipating that start of service would happen 6 months after the award of contract, and will actually, that piece will take 6 months to roll out, to transition all customers from the existing permitted hauler to the franchised hauler. And as Board President Maddox already mentioned, we'll be returning next time with a discussion on rates, fees, our contingency plan, and other discussions on exemptions of different business types.
That concludes your presentation?
Presentation.
Well, thank you very much. And as you know, this is the second in a series of hearings to ensure a thorough consideration of the details of the transition plan to an exclusive system. And our job here is to make this transition as smooth as possible, given the decision by the council. And if I could ask our committee members to focus on the areas that have been added to the plan today, and recognizing that we still have a few items that we will take up at our third and hopefully final hearing, which is scheduled for April. And those items will include a discussion about the inclusion or exemption of studios and hospitals. And I understand that sanitation is in continuous conversations with them. A direction as to the process for setting franchise fees, and we will follow up on last month's discussion about setting rates to minimize disparities among the zones, and we will have further assurance that customer satisfaction will be met with contingency plans for potential service lapses. So those are the items we will discuss at our third and final meeting, and hopefully today we will focus on those items that was presented by the Public Works Board and the Bureau of Sanitation. I want to thank my colleague, Councilmember Alarcon, the chair of the ad hoc, who has worked with us on getting us to this point, and my other colleagues, Mr. Koretz as well, who presented the original motion, and our newest member to Energy and Environment, Mr. Labange, who brings additional energy and insight into this, and knowledge and passion, right, passion. But with that, let me open it up to my colleagues if they have any questions and comments. I have a few questions, but I'll reserve mine till the end, and then we'll open it up for public comment. On the public comments, we have 1 minute per speaker, just so you can start preparing your public comments around a 1 minute time frame. So, Mr. Alarcon, as chair of the ad hoc, I'll turn it over to you. And if you want to add any statement or start asking questions.
We can just jump into the questions. First, just let me say that as we hone in, it's becoming more clear. And I think I want to commend staff for going through this process. I can only imagine how difficult it is to try and divvy up these boundaries and try to calculate the various things that contribute to cost, and it's just a very great challenge. So I commend you for this offering. There's a number of questions that I just want to insert into this process. And again, let me reiterate something I said at the previous meeting, that we have to remind ourselves constantly that this process is driven by our desire to improve our environment. And as long as we stay focused on that, we will not be put in a position to deviate when other important concepts impede that view. And so I want to make it very clear that I am driven primarily by a tremendous opportunity that we have to not only clean up our environment relative to this total system, but in a very specific way drive the next generation of technological advancement in this industry, as well as worker safety and the standards that we set really should be focused not on today's standards, but on what we think the standards should be in subsequent years. And to the extent that we drive those standards, we can drive this industry. And because Los Angeles is so prominent, we can literally impact not only our jurisdiction but the nation. And so that's how I'm looking at this. And it's a daunting challenge for staff, and I think you're doing a tremendous job so far. Always got to leave the door open. There's a couple of specific things on the certification. When you talk about certifying, and I just gave you a hint when I say increase the standards. What are you looking at in terms of certification? We have an existing certification process, but again, I see this as an opportunity through using a competitive model to drive those standards even further ahead. At the same time, we want to be cautious that we don't push people out of the competition because our standards are too onerous. And let's be very clear. We recognize that there have been recent stories about the nuisance issues that are caused, particularly in our recycling endeavors, and the need to clean up some of these facilities. So, can you just give me a brief statement on what your intentions are with regard to those subjects?
Yes, Karen Coca, Bureau of Sanitation. We took to heart the comments and the desires of the council in regards to raising the standards at solid waste facilities, making sure that they meet the standards, the very high standards that the city sets for itself. So that was the reason that we expanded on the certification process. Right now, our certification process certifies for a diversion rate. There is no expanded oversight in that. However, the opportunity presents itself through this process with the contracts that are going to be awarded to put standards and requirements in the contracts that can be enforced, rather than saying, well, somebody else is going to enforce it because we can't. Well, through our contractual process, we can. And if we put the standards together and make sure that they are rigorous, and work with them, but make sure also that there's some penalties involved with not complying, I think that those goals can be met. It will require people to visit the sites, specialized training. Right now, the local enforcement agency is trained to do all aspects of inspection at solid waste facilities, something similar to that, to allow our staff to actually go out and make sure that they're meeting those standards. So we do intend to do that.
And just to be very clear, whether those facilities are in the city of Los Angeles or outside of the city of Los Angeles, we will hold them to certified standards.
That's right. Through the contractual obligations of the franchisee, the boundaries are not an issue.
Okay, so if they try to dump in a very poorly managed facility outside the city of Los Angeles, we essentially can stop their contract.
Well, we spoke about how the contracts how we envision them being structured, that all the facilities they use would have to be approved by the city. So we would be certifying those
Okay.
facilities.
And those standards would include working conditions and safety, community nuisance issues, as well as technologies, advancement, and other standards, I assume.
Well, yes, we don't have everything figured out yet there. That's going to take some time, but we certainly want to continue to be on the cutting edge. We don't want to put something together now that would tie our hands, because it will take some time. So
Well,
we wanna make
but I
sure
think
we're
it's
ahead of
important
the
for
curve
us to
here.
make general statements and specific statements to the extent we can, because many of the things that are coming that impact this industry are very costly to the competitors, and they may have to finance projects over a long period of time, or at least line their activity up in such a way that they can incur indebtedness to meet those standards. And so the faster we can get that information, or as clear as we can get it, I think it's very helpful to the competition. So again, if we impose such rigorous standards in the third year, we may lose some of the competitors because they won't be able to get the financing to put those standards in place. So I think it's real important, to the extent possible, that we get to whatever standards we can as quickly as possible. I anticipate that we'll be getting more information as those standards are being developed and focused on, and so I trust you with that.
All right.
And Councilman
Yeah.
Alarcon, I'd like to add that, as you know, on our table 3.3 on page 3-13, we do have sample penalties for some of the haulers, but before our next meeting, I think it'd be appropriate to make sure that we have additional information, specifically as it relates to your question.
Yeah, the penalties are important. I mentioned them at the last hearing, but again, we want this we want the people that compete here for these contracts, we want them to be able to perform. We don't want to have to penalize them at any point. And so I believe the best way to get to that is to give them as much information about what those standards might be as soon as possible, rather than later in, when some of the smaller companies in particular would have difficulty putting together financing to support those improvements to their operations or their technologies. So I'm sure you're working on that. I just want to make it very public that you don't clean your environment without imposing costs, and getting to the best available technology comes with a cost. And so we want them to compete, we want them to bring in the lowest pricing, but we want them to be able to perform so that the environment will be protected as much as possible. So I think you understand these concepts. I'm really making a statement more for the audience so that they can absorb this as they are trying to design their programs for this competition. I'm concerned about the issue of the 40% max. If we are truly driven by, there's two concerns I have. First of all, if our primary endeavor is to improve our environment, I'm concerned that the cap might exclude the best available technology for no other reason than you already got too much. So that's one of my concerns, that we may exclude a company that can do it better than anybody else, simply because we've met our 40% cap. We know that a couple of these companies are already in the 30% range. We've also imposed conditions on them that would require them to subcontract with smaller companies. So I'm concerned that the amount of the subcontracting may start, because of the cap, it may impose a reduction on what they're already providing. So if a company is providing, let's say, 34%, and our requirements for subcontracting extend beyond 6%, they're already maxed out. And in fact, they may not be able to compete for additional contract. And in other words, some of those companies may take a loss in this process. And since we don't have, so the real question is, to the extent that we are imposing subcontracting, what do you anticipate to be the proportion of the contract that would go to the subcontractor as opposed to the prime?
Thank you for that question. I think you should know that we're open to cap rates of maybe perhaps 40 to 50%. As you know, there are a number of reasons for this decision, and I think it's something that's still under consideration. As you mentioned, we do have some haulers that are in the area that are servicing our communities that are already at like maybe 35%, and of course, there's an opportunity too for the city family to even need them to cover another area in case, for a contingency basis that would actually benefit the city family. And the other component that I think is really important is the subcontracting.
Yeah.
So I just want to let you know that our team is really open to the flexibility of anywhere between 40 to 50%, and that's something that we're still working on. As you know, that's something that we'll be covering in our April meeting.
And I'm very mindful that I led the discussion on the issue of small contractors and protecting their interests. So I'm not, I hate to be a politician talking out of both sides of my mouth, but what the hell, I'm retiring in a few months.
I'm going to go first class.
But the truth is that you have to balance both sides of that equation. And but I'm concerned that the 40% cap, even if there's a flexibility with staff to increase that depending on what we get in, I'm fearful that by imposing that cap, it's going to change the composition of the proposal. So I would think that we might want to just have a cap of 50% and leave it at that. Those that aren't in that range, the 30% range or even 25% range, they're not going to come close to the 40% no matter what. But those that are, we may need them to capture. And what we could do is look at maybe increasing the proportion that goes to subcontractors as we increase the cap, but give them the flexibility to compete in earnest and not have to trim services that they're already providing as part of their proposal. That might be a very difficult challenge. So I would urge that we look at increasing the cap. I wouldn't set it at 40% at all. I'd say at least to 45 to 50%. And I think that would cover any of those conflicts. Just a simple question with regard to those tiny areas. I'll call them tiny areas. Yeah, the 2% and 4% areas. Can anybody compete for those? You said it was going to be done in a separate process? They're not going to be bundled?
It's going to be done through the same process.
Same process, but
It's
they're
going
not
to
going to
be,
be bundled.
right, but by not bundling them, there won't be the opportunity to go, well, part of that 50% is I'll take this area too.
Oh, okay. So
they'll be set aside from that respect.
So essentially, but anybody could compete for them?
As of right now, yes. That's we don't know of any process that allows us to exclude proposers.
Okay, so let
based off
me
of
ask you
size.
this. If one of the large companies, they're competing for all these other areas, if they compete for this, but now you're telling me that 2% doesn't count toward the cap.
No, they would only get one award. So if you bundle if you have, say, two zones, say the two valley zones.
Right.
You would say, we'll bundle those together, and a contractor will get
One contract.
one award. So we will set what that one award
But that's
looks
subject
like.
to the cap rate.
What's that?
That's subject to the cap.
That is subject to the cap. So
So-
depending upon how the cap, where the cap falls, if it
So it would
falls...
still be included in the cap, the 2%.
No, I'm sorry.
No.
If I can try to clarify here. The three small zones, and to be clear, even those small zones are bigger than many cities in LA County.
That applies to everything in LA.
Yeah, the three small zones, our intention was to award them singly. They would not be awarded combined with other zones.
Okay, so that,
So if somebody won one of these, that would be all that they would get.
okay, so you're targeting smaller contractors?
Yes.
Okay, I mean, let's make it very clear for everybody.
Yes,
No.
we are.
Okay. Also, the size of the West Valley, that's huge. What's the thinking behind that one?
Well, the West Valley, which I'll speak to since I live there, the West Valley...
There you go, there's the
is-
explanation, or what?
Very spread out. If you look at it is quite a large zone, but is by no means the only large zone. In fact, there's other zones that have the same amount of service level in a smaller geographical area. Also, the West Valley...
Is that because it's more suburban, or?
It's just the makeup of that area. It's a lot of residential. It's not as concentrated, large multifamily and commercial. Large multifamily tends to be in certain areas or in corridors rather than throughout, like you would see in like the north central area. So one of the issues with West Valley is the distance from many recycling facilities, the distance from many transfer stations. There's landfills, one at the north end, one at the south.
We should have a
west
requirement
end.
that the recycling requirement is met in that area?
That hasn't been brought up. But we will, during the evaluation,
We should put a MRF
we
right in the
have
middle of the West Valley.
a MRF. Well, there is a quick
There is a-
MRF that we send our residential material.
Alex
to.
Hello for the Bureau of Sanitation. Quickly on the percentage, Councilman, when we looked at the total accounts and the cubic yard, it comes about 17% of the total city.
Yeah, I'm
So
looking at it.
Well, we did a whole bunch of numbers.
No, I'm just being
But,
facetious,
we
but
have
not really.
recycling facilities.
I'm just making a point that one of the problems with our system
Right.
is that we rely on recycling facilities in the poorer areas, like my district and Weezar's district and Ed Reyes's district, and the others get a pass nevertheless. So it's the same argument that the desert community complains about us dumping in their neighborhood. The other, where they're saying that Los Angeles should be responsible for its own trash, I'm saying that the West Valley should be responsible for its own trash, and the West LA area should be responsible for its own trash. And so I'm being facetious, but not really. And I say that, for those of you that don't know, I represented the West Valley for 8 years. So I'm saying this in all fairness, that they should be responsible for more of their own trash. And I should also mention that they have one of the largest landfills in the city of Los Angeles, so that's fair too. But I know there's one other question. I'm going to have to ask my Saeed Ali what that question was, but he's not here, so I'm going to pass and maybe I'll come back with that question. Thank you very much. Those are good answers.
Thank you. Mr. Koretz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to join my colleagues in thanking everyone for this remarkable overhaul and the great work, Enrique and Karen and the Bureau of Sanitation and Public Works and Andrea Alarcon and everyone for their good work on this. A few questions. One, I mean, similar to as Mr. Alarcon said, I'm concerned about a few things: environment, safety, enforcement, and competition. And probably the thing I want to ask the most about is enforcement. How confident are we that we will be able to fully enforce wage and hour and other labor laws and safety laws and diversion and follow up on all of those things? Because I know this is an industry that has a certain amount of high violation rate in some of these arenas.
I would say right now, the confidence level is there, and it's there mostly because of our commitment. What we've known throughout this process is one of the key components of this whole initiative is to address health and safety issues. As we go through the process, as Karen pointed out, we're going to be developing what all the requirements are. And through that, we're going to be developing what the resources are. And we have no plans of stopping short of securing the resources necessary to perform those functions. We have very good relationships with other enforcement agencies. The LEA, we work very closely with them. We'll work with them, actually, follow some of their own procedures set up to ensure that when we start, we'll have the teams in place to perform the inspections.
What about following the actual recyclable materials to make sure that they are actually recycled as claimed? Because there are some folks that say that LA has a high recycling rate and diversion rate, but it's actually not quite as high as we think because some things don't actually get recycled as claimed. So if someone was claiming they recycle their plastics, but their plastics get sold to China and they burn them in China, how far do we go to actually make sure that what we think is happening and what we want to happen is actually happening?
Well, we already do some of that right now through our certification process. Our certification process doesn't stop, and for those who don't know, the city already has a program in which we certify processors that process mixed waste, mixed construction waste, and food waste. As part of that process, we actually go out, inspect facilities, and we track material not only through the internal processes, but we actually require them to provide us documentation on where the material goes. And then when we get that documentation, we follow up with the facilities to verify what those facilities are doing with the material. So our own certification process right now does not rely on the facilities to tell us what their diversion rates are, or stop short of just going out and visiting the facility and see what they do. We do follow the material as far as where it goes after it leaves some facilities.
So we currently have a fair number of on-site visits and following of materials, and we expect to do that at least as well through this process.
Yes.
Councilman Koretz, also, for example, in the Bureau of Sanitation, we handle hazardous waste. A lot of the hazardous waste is collected in the city and sent out of state. We do audits of the facilities out of state to make sure that they meet the emission requirements. We visit these things. Now, when it came to the recyclables, I know, for example, in Japan, when we did the visit to our waste-to-energy facility, they rely on the plastic to produce their energy. And in our case, we get paid for the recyclables. In the city, we generate close to $6 million a year, so it's very advantageous for the recycler to use it. Unfortunately, a lot of the markets are overseas, and sometimes they get recycled, and sometimes they use them to produce energy.
So, but we'll follow up even to that extent. Will we follow up overseas?
Well, we will have. I mean, if we want to track all the products where they go, the paper, one of them. The metal, the plastics, we will have to do something. But I know in the United States, we visit the facilities in Texas, in Utah, and other places where they take the hazardous waste and they do the treatment to make sure that they are following RCRA and other environmental regulations.
And I'd like to add one point, Councilman. Of course, it's a very fair question. Sometimes the diversion numbers may not be realistic, but you have to keep in mind is now we have a system of a great deal of competition, and I think that people will be known by their reputations, and we do know some of the folks that are better with being forthright in how they conduct business as it relates to their workers, health and safety regulations, as well as their diversion numbers. So the thing is that we also have partnerships with other entities, and I think that those are things that we will look into if we have any issues with any haulers in particular. We have partnership, as you know. I'm a former deputy city attorney, and as it relates to someone, violating the agreements or the law, we will use all appropriate remedies as it relates to even referring a case over to Cal OSHA, working with the city attorney, of course, even the district attorney in these cases.
And I don't know if we even have decided what the process will be in terms of how we select these haulers, but I'm wondering if we have decided yet whether or not legally and otherwise we can look at their past violations, wage and hour violations, safety violations, incorrect diversion claims, etc.
And Councilman, I expect that those will be items that we will have listed in the RFP, the request for proposal.
So we are keeping those in mind, because obviously enforcement will be easier if we select people that have been good players to begin with. A couple other things. I'm a little concerned about the section that says we'll give preference to folks that have worked in LA already. As far as I know, there's only a couple of haulers that are based in LA, so we aren't getting the full benefit of the other haulers that do business actually being based in the city. And I know there are some good haulers who haven't competed in LA previously, sometimes because it's such a rough and tumble industry and known as the wild, wild west among some, and may want to come in and be among the better players. So I question whether we should give that preference and wonder if we're considering whether to keep that in or take that out.
Well, we did look at, we've heard from a lot of stakeholders, and we do know when we come to evaluating the proposals that their current and past performance is going to weigh very heavily on the award of the contracts. If they are here locally, serving locally, and they're doing a fantastic job, that's part of the evaluation. It does not preclude other people who have not worked in the LA market from proposing, not at all. It's open to all haulers. And it also does not preclude them winning. It simply recognizes that there are a lot of haulers who have a substantial stake here in the city and have had for a considerable amount of time.
Well, I have some queasiness about that, so I'm just putting that in up front. Okay. I think the biggest advantage is if they're actually based in the city, but beyond that, I wouldn't weigh it too heavily. Because if they have best practices and great success in Orange County, I mean, just to pull an example, I don't know if there's anyone in that circumstance. I don't know that we'd want to say, well, they're doing well there, but it isn't here, so we won't consider that as strong a best practice.
No, I don't believe that that's what we were talking about. When you do an evaluation, there's points given for a range of different things. Performance in where they operate now is going to be a big part of it. What we're talking about is to give a little bump if you have a significant portion of your work and you've done a lot of work here in City of Los Angeles, but only if you've done it very well.
And if I could go a little further, the goal is compliance with the city's business inclusion, local business inclusion program, which already has rules set up, and it's not always just specific to the city of LA, it's the LA region, and it's that program is already completely vetted, procedures are set up that when you, for proposals for it actually points awarded for businesses that fall within the LA region, as well as their subcontractors. That program already is in place.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
just my thought, we don't want to do anything that weakens our ability to pick the best players, whether they're
Right.
active in the area right now or not.
Councilman, I think it's important for us to note that at this time it's LA County, but maybe we can look into including Southern California as the area. I know that right now, I believe Dan was talking about 8014, the Business Inclusion Plan, but I believe that we're open to being flexible, because if you're an award-winning hauler in another jurisdiction outside of LA County, I don't want it to preclude you in any way from getting business with the City of Los Angeles, particularly if you're award-winning. I think that is a component that we will look at and to add that into the RFP.
And I don't really know the players, I'm not being specific, so
Right.
they may be in Southern California, they could be in Northern California, but I know there are other good players out there, so
Exactly.
I just hope we don't miss them. I also am a little queasy about going to 50%. I think we'd have a better shot at more competition and more appropriateness if it were less. I'm probably more comfortable at 40, but just in theory, I'd like to see us not go over 49%. Having someone with 50% of the market just strikes me as being a little too much. So I'd rather do 40, but even if I couldn't succeed in that, I'd like to at least keep it under the 50% number. Also, I've been struggling throughout this whole process about competition and the number of zones. I wonder if you could walk me through again why we picked 11, why we wouldn't look at 13 or 15, in terms of, I know we're trying to balance enough competition and the environmental factors of not having, too many zones and having people crisscrossing to get to them and reducing the traffic, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we pick 11? Are we wedded to 11? What happens if we look at more? Do we have to start the whole process over, or can we look at a small increase in number, and does it make any sense?
Well, to begin with, I mean, the 11 is where we really started dividing the existing waste sheds up and started dividing them to what makes sense. Also, as we add more zones, that will, I assume the reason we would do it is to establish additional contracts. It does begin to add the administrative burden. Every contract awarded is another contract that we have to manage. So we in establishing the 11, worked to balance what we felt was a reasonable number to provide opportunities for waste haulers throughout the city, by still, knowing that in the end, we're going to be managing these contracts. And, managing 20 contracts is that much more difficult than managing 11. There was quite a bit of thought process put together in the establishment of these zones, not breaking zones up further. An example would be the establishment of the West LA zone. Our first hack at it is we said, okay, we'll divide that into two waste sheds, two zones. But when we did that, we started to notice that may not be the best thing for that zone. The northern part of that zone, the Palisades area, not nearly as easy to service, windy streets, difficult to get in and out of. The northern part of that zone, higher concentration of businesses, easier ideally to service. By making that one zone, we actually meld those two services types into one zone that would give us we felt a competitive rate. So it's that thought process that went into establishing all of these zones and where the boundaries were drawn. Adding more zones would actually cause us to go back and kind of start that process again. We do feel that the 11 zones provide an opportunity. And it's also why we didn't go in trying to make every zone the same size. Every hauler isn't the same size. Haulers have different, different specialties. Say a medium-sized zone that might have 6,000 accounts might be the right fit for certain haulers. So that's kind of the thought process of how we came up with 11, how we went through that division, and why we don't believe that adding additional zones would actually give us any better end product at this time. But we do know it would add more administrative process.
I just would like, this is Steve Nutter from the board. Another factor to consider in this is that the larger the zones, we think that you'll have a better environmental impact. You can have greater routing efficiencies, less truck miles overall if you're not having too many zones and people having to travel a long distance to get to the zone. You're going to have more likely to have the MRFs and the other supportive activities, I think, within a larger zone than if you have a lot of little zones.
Which, of course, is a lot of the purpose of doing this to begin with.
Mr. Kretz, on the question, on your question, that sort of speaks in contradiction to the concept of bundling. So just because we have 11 proposed districts doesn't mean we're going to end up with 11 contracts. We're likely to end up with 6 or 7 contracts, or maybe 8 or 9, I don't know. But if you're going to combine some of these districts into one bundled contract, by saying that, what I'm saying is, if you had 13 districts, you could still bundle and meet your objectives.
That's absolutely correct. The idea with the bundling is to provide opportunities. The bundling doesn't necessitate. The bundling is not a mandatory function. It's not that if we take 3 zones and say this makes bundle B, that we would actually award bundle B. That it could potentially be 11 contracts. 13 those zones would be potentially 13
I'm actually following on Mr. Koretz's line of concern, and that has to do with there are many areas of pockets in Los Angeles that have contiguous issues, and so the question would beg the question for why not identify those and allow somebody to do specific targeting, but at the same time allow somebody to come in with a bundling proposal that it would include a smaller area. So I don't think there's any reason why we should necessarily throw out the idea of having more districts for the proposals. But I recognize at the end of the day, we don't want to have 32 contracts. And believe me, I support you on that. But I'm thinking that in the proposal process, I see no reason why we couldn't have more districts.
If I may, council members, the discussion, certainly we had to pick, a starting point for the discussion. And we have, and we believe that we came up with rational reasons to draw each of the boundaries. The only thing that I would caution is where the number ends up, because if we're having contractors bid on, say, 25 zones, somebody could come in with 25 different cost proposals depending on the zone, and we would have to analyze and compare all
I think I know who that is, too.
So that would be the only thing that would strike fear in my heart is the evaluation.
I recognize that,
Karen. As far as the
I
number itself,
I recognize that, but what I'm suggesting is anybody that can compete for 25 different areas is likely to submit a bundling concept that is going to reduce the rate. So,
Absolutely. And that was the idea of...
what I'm saying is you can get to the same objective for the number of contracts by having larger or smaller. That's all I'm saying. I don't really understand the math there.
As a practical matter, is there any way for us to even consider 13 districts or 15 districts without setting back the whole process?
Certainly, with some guidance for redrawing the maps, we would be able to do that. As far as setting it back, it would depend on how much redrawing of the maps we need to do and how, and some of the direction from the committees about what your wishes are in regards to the zones.
I mean, I don't necessarily have any direction in terms of the zones. I'm just wondering if we haven't cut them so tightly that there's not adequate competition and we don't leave a little more room for that.
I see.
I mean, sanitation, Councilman, has 6 zones that we service in the city. So when we cut them to basically the 11 zones, we were able to produce the 3 for the small haulers to compete. Plus, we wanted the economy of scale so we can get very competitive rates because we are requiring the haulers to meet the new clean fuel vehicle trucks, increase recycling, do new programs on the food waste, and provide the city residents with still a very competitive rate. So that's why we created these 11 zones. And but again, if there is other ideas, we would be more than happy to look into it. But we wanted to come back with very competitive rates to you.
Let me suggest a couple other things. Have there been much outreach to churches and synagogues and other places of worship about how this would work, homeless shelters, etc., particularly in terms of how they would integrate their food waste into this whole process?
Councilmember, yes, we attended a meeting this week with a representative from the faith organizations. We haven't, as of yet, had a lot of time to meet yet with individual groups, but we're trying to set up meetings, and we're calling on the users of the system currently to tell us what they need out of it, and so we're starting to gather that specific information, and we'll continue to do that.
Okay, and also one other thought, which is I don't know if we could somehow have these smaller hauler zones placed in the city's Green Tech Business Incubator Program area, so that perhaps that could be where they innovate new practices and technologies. I'd like to have them be able to do that. It might also help them to be ready to step up and take over a larger zone if their needs aren't being met. I think it adds more competition, and I think it would generally be a good idea. So just one more thought, and anything else I might have to say, I'll do it after we've heard from the public.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Mr. LeBonge.
Thank you very much. Following up on the zones, this map here, it's a map. I'd like to request the Board of Public Works to have a hearing with anyone who would want to come to discuss size and mapping and justify it a little better. I think it's real important to hear some ideas from people have. This is a very serious issue. There's 3 things that we do extremely well in Los Angeles. DWP provides us water. We turn off faucet, it comes from far away. We flip a switch, the power comes on from far away. And then every week somewhere in Los Angeles, we supervise the collection of municipal waste. We're stepping into a big area, which is a big area. So we've got to do it right. There's guidelines from the state that you're trying to do, and everybody seems to be committed to it. There's also interest by many, so I wanted to make those points. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know what the CLA could think of, or what. I don't want you to have to go back and reinvent anything. I just want you to have a hearing in Public Works in the next 2 or 3 weeks or something, and then invite anyone to come. We'll send our deputies or go to say, these are the borders, this is why we justify it. And if someone has any ideas, come too. They may have a better idea.
And Councilman, we're not opposed to having a meeting with the Board of Public Works on this matter.
All right, if people have another...
We will discuss this with the president of the board and see how our hearing that's coming up in April, how they fit.
Okay.
Yeah, but Mr. Bonner, my only concern is that this is a very complex issue with a lot of moving parts, and to have a hearing on any specific component of this entire process could belabor the issue and for one thing, take a lot of...
I just got the map right
Excuse me,
now.
if I could
so-
finish.
let me excuse
If I could
you.
finish, no,
I know,
if
but
I
I'm
could
waiting
finish
for
my
everybody to
thought.
speak.
Excuse me, Mr. Lawrence.
Okay.
The staff is very burdened on this issue already, and to have to conduct specific meetings on specific items in this, I think, is going to impose an additional burden that could, again, belabor the process. And that's the purpose of these hearings, is to hear all of these issues. So I don't think we
just don't-
we
I
have to
think
do it
in
again.
fairness to everybody, because it's a very big step, that in the president, you're the president, Ms. Maddox, aren't you? You're the president of the Board of Public Works?
Excuse me, Councilman, I'm sorry I didn't hear you.
Who's the president of the Board of Public Works?
Pre-med.
Right, okay, she said she could have a hearing.
Right, and what
So-
we're doing is we're actually having meetings, and I want to be clear that this has left the Board of Public Works as of last winter.
Right.
And council has voted on it. However, we are open to...
This is the first time we saw the maps, right?
Right, but
If redistricting came out this way, we wouldn't certainly just say, okay, and go.
But we're
We want to
open
have
to
some
meeting with the
opportunity.
smaller haulers on this matter, and I think there's some other folks that have an interest. So I'm open to having meetings, but it wouldn't be like anything we would vote on as far as...
Just on the
board-
zones, just to give any suggestions that people have in zones. They may have ideas, that's all I would say. And also, too, is trash going to be picked up how many times a week? And could we restrict it to 4 days a week to try to lessen congestion? I've always wanted municipal trash picked up on 4 days a week to take 580 trucks off the road, but we don't seem to do it. There's a new energy here. I don't know. It's if you want to really try to be green, you're trying to take trucks off the road, is that possible? You know, but I'll discuss this, and I'm new to your committee, Mr. Weezer, but I think it's something we're going to look at, because this is the big step. This is almost like a transformation. So we want to do the right thing all the way, and I think it would be good to look at, you know, because we want to take cars off the road, trucks off the road. These are trucks. Do we require them to pick them up on days? You know, is one day, how does that go? I don't know. Has anyone thought about that? Any professionals?
Okay, Karen?
As far as limiting the days that trash can be
Right, people
picked
are
up,
talking too much. You can't hear it, please.
that may not be possible, or
Have you
I would
thought
say
about
it's
it?
not.
Have you thought about it?
It is, we've talked to a lot of businesses, and what we do know from the businesses is that many of their waste needs are very specific, and many of those are time-specific waste needs. We spoke with a hospital that has to have their waste picked up 3 times a day, every single day.
I got that.
And so there's definitely instances where we don't believe that type of limitation is possible. Our goal through the program
But have you
is
thought
to
about
work
it?
with the
Meaning,
waste
see,
haulers.
this is what I want you to ask. This is a real good moment for us, that everybody is coming together trying to think of all things to do right in a variety of areas. But have we actually thought about it in any sense? Does it make sense to do this? Do we pick trash up on Sunday anywhere?
Yes,
You know, I think it's a good question, but as I said in the last meeting, that we should enable the industry to drive those questions by virtue of their proposal. So if somebody proposes to pick up trash on 4 days, I think that's a great thing. But I think we need to let the industry drive this in terms of providing the best possible service.
But I think you're going to be, I read the report, you're going to have a team of people who are going to be the inspectors, the enforcers of all the variety of values that we want to try to achieve here. So I just wanted to put that on, because I really believe there's an opportunity to try to do that, you know, in some ways. I do think, though, is this the first time this map's been public? So I just think it would be fair if in the next 3 weeks on the issue of the map, if anyone have any comments. They could say they don't like it. They could say it should change. They should say you could do it by 5 districts.
We'll work that out with
Do
the
it by
president
10.
of the board.
If you could do that, that'd be great. Does this affect roll-offs at all?
Roll-off means that deals with refuse?
Yes.
Yes, it does.
It does affect roll-offs. So if someone has a roll-off, then, they'll only have, if there's somebody on Wilshire Boulevard who gets a permit from the Board of Public Works to have a roll-off there for 3 days for either an event or a demolition of construction, is the roll-off then
If I can
exclusive?
Right, sir. For temporary use such as construction and demolition, we're not proposing that that be included in the franchise. Regular service or service at a commercial premise that's not temporary, such as a construction bin.
Well, the observatory has a roll-off, if you know.
Well, if it's there full-time
Right.
and it's collected on a regular schedule or even an irregular schedule, we have some people that told us they have a roll-off and they have it collected once every 2 months. That's still considered commercial service to us. That's not temporary. Temporary would be a couple of days,
Right.
a construction and demolition type of project, that sort of thing.
Okay,
We
So I
service
just-
actually the observatory is one of the sanitation.
right,
That's
service, but it's a roll-off on that.
Yes.
Okay. So also, what about USC and UCLA? Are they treated equally?
Crosstown rivalry.
Depends who-
Luckily, I went
I think UCLA should be treated with some preference.
Well,
Yes.
That's a short answer.
Chairman Mendoza agrees too, right?
all of the organizations that are state organizations may or may not choose to be in a franchise by
Okay.
state law.
Okay, all right, so that's the question. If post office separate?
If they choose to be.
If they choose to be, they may want to do that at all. But SC, is SC in the zone?
USC is a private school. It's a private school.
Things are man to man. Yeah.
Right.
But again, we encourage haulers who are proposing to work with, folks that are providing great service now. So if that's an opportunity, it's an opportunity.
I just think that these large institutions, you have the big county and Norris and all the USC complex there, what that means, I mean, that's an integrated mix that is up there. I think it's real important to look at that. And also our LA Unified schools.
LA Unified Schools have been participating in our permit system, and
But
we've...
are they going to be required at Los Angeles High School on Olympic Boulevard to be in this zone?
They are not required by
Okay.
state law.
Okay, on that. And also, the other thing, too, anybody remember the movie Damn Yankees, other than the Sanitation Bureau that's sitting there at the table? Damn Yankees was, Tab Hunter was in it, and it was about a guy who wanted to beat the Yankees. Whatever Lola wants, Lola gets. Very good at it, Richard. You and I are the only two old guys here, remember it. Right. Anyway, they had an escape clause. What is your interpretation, Board of Public Works, Bureau of Sanitation, if within 3 years you see challenges, you see it's overwhelmed, is there an escape clause? How does this determined?
Well, Councilman, a very good question, and thank you so much for bringing back our movie memorabilia. I think it's really important for you to know that on our list and our checklist, we have a contingency plan that will be a part of our next presentation.
Okay, and then you just made me think of this. What if there's a labor issue and you're in a zone?
Right, and we have, our other haulers will actually step in and cover
Without a
those.
problem. They'll cross a line,
And that's-
even though they may be their brothers of the same local?
Well, we have a number of people in the room that know a great deal about labor issues, and I'll leave that to them, but the deal is I just wanted to let you know that the city does have a contingency plan, and the other thing, too, is that the Bureau of Sanitation can move forward in assisting in this matter as well.
Right, but we're here to serve the people, which is the number one thing on that. So if there's a problem, we don't want to have what they used to have in the East Coast where they sat for weeks.
The trash outside,
On that.
that's not going to happen here in Los Angeles.
Good, and we're looking to try to find a way to help studios?
That is correct.
Right.
We have addressed that issue.
Right.
We're in the process of still having meetings with members of the MPAA family, and again, at our April hearing, we will have additional information to have that matter clarified.
Okay. The only thing I really want out of this actually today is that you have a discussion with the President of the Board of Public Works
Yes, sir.
and the Bureau Chiefs and Division Chiefs of sanitation to ask just, what do you think about the map? Post it, have a meeting, 10:30 or thereafter, one day on the same day you meet, and let people come in and say what they think. And there may be some ideas. The best engineers sometimes, I find, are when you have a community meeting, you get all the ideas on a table, and maybe there's an idea that we haven't thought of.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labange. Mr. Ehrlich, you said you had another question?
I know this is absorbing a lot of staff time, that I assume you were working 40 hours a week before we began this process, and so as we move forward and this process gets more intense, is there any anticipation that there will be additional needs by the department in terms of fulfilling the responsibilities here?
The council, Councilman Alacon, the council did authorize us for 6 positions. We will be probably bringing them on board in the next 2 to 3 months just because of the process. So we believe right now with these 6 positions, it will help us to address this part of the plan and issue the RFP.
Okay, and as we enter into the budget cycle, is there any anticipation that there will be additional needs in next year's phase?
At this stage, the CAO knows we need these 6 positions to be continued, so they have not deleted them from the budget. So it just takes a long time for hire. So as long as we can get these 6 positions on board, I think we can
cover next
continue
year.
to cover, and we'll give some vacation to Dan and Karen because they've been working through the Christmas holidays and the breaks. So
I thought this was their vacation. No. Okay, thank you.
thank you.
A couple of quick questions. Again, what is the combined market share of the 3 smaller zones?
The 3 smaller zones, the combined market share is around 8%.
8%, so it's not...
It's around 8%.
That's it, give or take 7, 8, okay. And are these zones size such that when contracts are up, firms in these smaller zones may be able to compete for a larger zone? And how do we ensure that that happens?
Well,
We may not ensure it, but how do we provide opportunities for that to happen?
Well, and that's kind of our thought process as we went through the development of the zones and not making all very large zones. We have zones that are in the 2,000 account range, but then as we get out of those 3 small zones, we have zones that are in the 4,000 account range, 6,000 account range. So what we're hoping is that these small haulers, as they grow and show that they can provide the service in the small zones, as we go through the process, there's zones that are a little larger in size that they can continue to move up through the process. So that was the idea of the varied size zones, is to provide opportunities not only now, but as in the future and allow for growth.
Good, and there's no subcontracting is allowed, but it's not mandated as you're currently proposing, right?
That is correct.
And you guys support that because it allows haulers to market their own unique services to franchisees. And but at what point will we be able to assess the number of small haulers who are subcontractors to the selected franchisees? When can we determine? They're not mandated. It's allowed. How do we determine how many subcontractors are actually there? And
But we know that there's a lot of discussions already going on well in advance of any RFP that goes out. And there's certainly some areas of the city that it would behoove whoever is proposing to partner with a really strong small local hauler. But as you pointed out, we don't have a requirement in this right now. So when they come back with the proposals is really when we would see how the partnership is going to work.
And what's the status of the EIR process?
The EIR process, we posted a notice of preparation for the EIR that was directed by council. We held 7 scoping meetings throughout the city. Contractor came and gave presentations, and the comment period for the notice of preparation is open until the 27th of this month.
To the 27th of this month. So, and you feel there's been adequate outreach to all stakeholders to be aware that that's out there?
We certainly have a huge list of stakeholders as well as some of the council offices have actually done newsletters and other things to reach out.
Okay. And in transition, if this were to happen, let's say January of 2017, and we have new haulers, and let's say we have a hauler who was not selected, how do we ensure that there's no disruption in service during that, let's call it lame duck season, when we're transitioning? Mr. Alarcon doesn't like that term.
Well, in the industry,
I thought he was an Oregon Duck fan, but no, it's just you're sensitive to that, you said, huh? Okay.
yes, council member, in the industry, it actually happens fairly frequently. Maybe haulers can speak to that, you know, a contract changes, they have to move into an area, do an assessment of customer needs, roll out service. Sometimes they buy the equipment that's on site, other times they plan their own. It actually happens fairly frequently out there in the market. So I believe that with a transition plan and a lot of outreach to the customers to make sure their needs are being met, that we should be able to accomplish
If
that.
I could ask you to look into other cities who have transitioned into an exclusive system and see if that has happened there, and what those cities did or did not do to prevent our customers from being, their service being disrupted, and maybe if there's anything we can put in the ordinance to prevent that from happening, because the last thing we want is for our customers in the city to be disrupted because of this transition. I think the transition period is going to be very, very important.
We'll be able to do that, Councilman.
Okay.
Thank you.
We might want to create an emergency plan should that event occur. What would the city do? I would assume that the city's resources would have to come in and provide that service, but we should have it planned as opposed to doing it on the spur of the moment.
It's a very good point, Councilman, and as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have a contingency plan as a part of our next meeting in April. So
Great.
thank you for that point.
If there's one reason why council members do not get reelected, is because people's trash is not being picked up.
Exactly. We understand.
That's the reason.
For the record, that's not the reason.
Hello, is
Just I watch a lot of movies. I watch a lot of movies like Mr. LaBonge, and that's, it's... Can you tell me where that happened, what movie that was, Mr. LaBonge? You're pretty good at this. Okay. Anyway, Mr. Alarcon, any other...
I do have on the subcontracting, I would only hope that whatever subcontracting does occur does not undermine existing employment contractual obligations that the Prime has with their employees. And so I would like for the department to do some analysis of ensuring that if a subcontractor comes on board, that they actually uplift their standards as opposed to reducing. In other words, all the ships should rise in this process as opposed to reducing benefits, wages, and protections. And then secondly, to follow on Mr. Weezar's point, there's no reason why a prime contractor couldn't submit a bid without subcontractors and with subcontractors for the same area, so that you can get a measure and then allow the council to a policy consideration as to which one will provide the better service, not only for the customers, but for the employment-related benefits that we're trying to drive through this process as well. Got it? I wasn't sure.
And last
Thank you.
request is we could have a report back at our April meeting on the budget and personnel needs plans to finish out the program development process. Okay?
All right.
I think we have talked about it, but let's have a clear report back.
I do want to mention one other thing. The point I was trying to make on the positions and the resources, it seems to me that the budget process is protected to the extent that we demonstrate the need. I'm concerned that the 6 positions that you've requested, that we really don't have a plan for how those positions are going to be utilized. And this and in my mind, that could make them vulnerable in the upcoming budget process. So it would seem to me, hopefully in the April meeting, that the department should come back with some kind of delineation of more specifically how those positions are going to be used next year.
Honestly,
Are they general fund
No,
positions?
special fund.
So I think we go, okay.
The CAO makes us submit 8 pages for each position, so we have a detailed description what each position is going to do, and we'll bring them in April.
Okay, great.
I just want to make sure that we have the 6 positions as a start, and then,
Okay, 6 positions, 48 pages. Got it.
exactly.
Okay.
Thank you. So with that, let's go to public comment. Thank you very much, and thank you all for your hard work. I'll call 3 people up at a time. Please come up and take a seat, and then we will call up the next 3 people. Actually, 4, says Mr. Labange. Martha Cox Nicticaman, Ron Saldana, Kelly Astor, and Nicole Shahinian. And if you could please state your name before you begin your testimony. 1 minute, please. Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, Martha Cox Dickman. I'm with the Building Owners and Managers Association. We represent over 300 commercial office building owners. I wanted to thank the Bureau of Sanitation for their work on the initial draft. BOMA has had the opportunity to meet with the department on issues of concern, especially the issue of continuing LEED certification for office buildings. BOMA's been consistent in stressing that our primary issue with the new franchise is customer service. We appreciate the sections in the report dedicated to customer service standards. I quickly want to mention 2 concerns. In Section 3.5 on consistent customer service standards, we're told customers can schedule collection times that meet their needs, quote, as long as the hauler is also able to efficiently move their vehicles through the city. We understand the environmental benefits of efficiency, but urge staff to work towards a culture of flexibility along with efficiency. Also, while we appreciate the inclusion of financial penalties as a tool for compliance, we hope the city's oversight of performance is strong and consistent from day one. We shouldn't wait. Thank you.
You could just finish up your
Thank you.
sentence.
I was just going to say, we shouldn't wait until the problem is overpowering or huge to take action for poor service. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ron Saldana with the Los Angeles County Disposal Association. We represent a lot of the small and medium-sized haulers that work in Los Angeles currently. Just a couple of comments, primarily regarding zones. We believe that with only 11 zones, only 3 of which are under the 2,500 service locations, the report says these zones are developed to promote competition. We think that it's clear that when you limit the zones to 11, and when you incorporate a bundling component, and when you allow a single company to be awarded up to 40 or 45 or higher percent, that really this is not a system or a design that's going to protect the smaller haulers. And one thing I just wanted to say is that don't forget that no matter how many zones you have, and our recommendation is 20 zones with 8 of the larger zones, so you wouldn't change those very much. But with some smaller zones added in the 1,000 to 2,000 service location, that would be our recommendation. But if I could just finish in 1 second, don't forget that no matter how many zones you have, basically your collection system is going to be the same, the trucks are going to be the same, the number of businesses are going to be the same, and the amount of waste and recyclables that you pick up are also going to be the same.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, council members. My name is Kelly Astor. I'm here on behalf of the Los Angeles County Waste Management Association. We're the 85%ers, those that have the largest share of the market under the existing system. I'm grateful that Mr. Kretz is here, step back in the room, because I wanted to talk about your point, sir, on incumbency. It is true that the report talks about the staff there being a preference of sorts for those that have been here, and our organization very vigorously supports that, we think for very good reason. Before it became real attractive, when exclusive franchises were or the promise of an exclusive franchise was being handed out, a number of companies here worked in the most rigorously competitive environment in the nation. Those that have survived, we think, ought to be given the benefit of the doubt. If you look at the franchise program goals in staff's report, nowhere does it say we want to dislocate haulers. And in fact, if you can avoid that dislocation, we would respectfully submit that you ought to. If they're doing a good job, if they've got the record that you need, on balance, all the things being equal, give it to the local people that have been here all this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Nicole Shahanian, Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. As you know, the franchise of the city's waste hauling services will have wide impacts for businesses throughout Hollywood and all of Los Angeles. The Chamber continues to believe that quality of service is directly related to competition. The Chamber asks that the Council do all it can to ensure that there are adequate procedures in place to address problems that arise between waste service providers and the businesses that they will be serving. It is critical that LA businesses receive a high level of customer service, and one way to ensure this is that no one waste shed is so large and unmanageable that it can't be properly serviced. A waste franchise system for the city should have as many zones as possible to ensure that consumers receive the best customer service, and that there are significant opportunities for the small, independently owned waste haulers to compete. The EIR is studying as one alternative a system with 20 zones. We believe this is a more workable and manageable plan for the city than the current proposal of 11 zones. We understand and support the city's policy goals, but we want to see them happen in the most efficient way possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speakers are Lisa Gritzner, Jeremy Drake, Adrienne Martinez, Gail Bryce.
Hi there, Lisa Gritzner representing the California Apartment Association. Wanted to echo some of the commentary that you've heard today. I think an alternative that might help get at some of the issues that you guys were already discussing would be that the EIR would study an alternative that would include as many as 20 zones. I think it would eliminate the need that sanitation was concerned about having to redo all the work that they've done to date, but it would provide an alternative that you guys could look at should it be determined after the studies completed in the EIR that these zones are too big, or that in the case of some of the things that we're worried about, which is that there are more apartments in the city than perhaps the department is aware of, and so these zones may be bigger than what they're anticipating. The other thing I wanted to commend on behalf of our member Park La Brea in particular is the idea of subcontracting and sub-hauling is very important. Park La Brea has an award-winning recycling program, and we would very much like to make sure that our hauler A and B recycling is a part of whoever would get awarded that zone. Thanks.
Thank you. Next.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Drake. I am a member of the Sierra Club Angeles Chapter Zero Waste Committee, and I'm also the lead on organics issues in the state of California. Sierra Club believes that to get to zero waste, we'll need to figure out how to stop throwing compostable organics into our landfills. According to the EPA, food scraps now make up about 33% of the waste we landfill nationally, more than any other thing that we throw away. Here in LA, according to the Bureau, more than 60% of our restaurant waste is food. So we congratulate the Bureau for recognizing the need and really committing to making organics a priority in the franchise. As the Bureau has also recognized, one of the biggest challenges to and most critical pieces of the success of recycling organics is ensuring source separation. But along with source separation, a lack of infrastructure to process organics is a major challenge we must overcome. Current air regs make it difficult to permit the siting and development of organics processing. So as you move forward, we urge you to work with the Air District and Cal Recycle to overcome those obstacles to processing.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrian Martinez, and I'm here on behalf of the Natural Resources Defense Council and our thousands of members in Los Angeles. At the outset, I think the second iteration of the implementation plan is really good. There's been obviously a lot of work. I think we saw a great amount of progress since the last iteration. The one issue I want to raise is about environmental performance. I'm happy to hear many of the council members say that environmental performance is kind of one of the lead goals here. I want to remind the members that in the commercial sector, right now, diversion from landfills is about 19%. So there is this imperative to move forward quickly. And I want to say that in the RFP process, there should be some minimum requirements for diversion and recycling, but we should encourage responsive bidders to commit to an even higher goal that they see feasible through their analysis. And that's the way we're going to increase competition and really get the best environmental performance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Gail Bryce. I'm with the Carpet Recyclers in La Mirada, California. We operate an award-winning carpet recycling facility that diverts materials from landfill, saves oil, greatly reduces greenhouse gases, and has also created over 100 new green jobs in the last 2 years. Carpet makes up 3% of all waste disposed of in the United States. It's estimated that over 38 million pounds of used carpet is generated in the city of Los Angeles annually. Carpet is such a large and valuable waste stream that the state of California now charges a recycling assessment fee on all new carpet that's purchased in the state and provides rebates to the carpet recyclers. Carpet can be recycled, must be dry and relatively clean. Our biggest challenge is securing enough carpet to be recycled, which has not been mixed with garbage or construction waste. We are excited about the city's commitment to adopt a commercial franchise system and hope that it will result in better collections and increased carpet recycling. That said, we request that the following is included in the plan, is that you include recycling, carpet recycling, how the franchisees would deal with carpet recycling, and also that carpet should not be included in the proposed exemption of construction and demolition waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those comments. Andrea Nichols, Hillary Gordon, Jason Mikau, Kobe King.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Nichols. I'm with the LA County Federation of Labor in partnership with UCLA Loesch. As you might know, Loesch is a nationally recognized center promoting safe jobs and worker health through education, research, and policy advocacy. The waste industry is one of the most dangerous industries out there, and we thank the Bureau for laying out a very clear path to making it a safer one. But we also encourage you to go several steps further to ensure that the new system will truly protect workers. And so this includes specific things that we want to see in the RFP, including whistleblower protection, so because workers are the eyes and the ears of this industry, and they shouldn't face retaliation from their employers for doing the right thing and speaking up. Second, meaningful health and safety training. So a clear description of the franchisee's program and plan for worker health and safety training over the course of the franchisee term. And third, responsible contractor language, requiring that responsive bidders report and document any and all citations, violations, workers' compensation claims over the last 15 years. So we believe that a combination of these three things will be the best way to ensure that the new system is working the way that we intended and that it protects these workers who provide this vital service to our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Alarcon?
I just have a technical question. Enrique, is that something that's in the proposal process or in the contract process?
All of that would be, Enrique Zaldivar, the Director of Sanitation, all of that would be in the RFP, Councilman. So, some will be outright requirements. It's not subjective, it'll be required.
And we will review those before you put those out, right? Okay.
The RFP, those will be in the RFP. Those will not be in the implementation plan.
Okay.
But add physical fitness program, because it's a physical job and fitness is important. So I think you had 3 good points, but the fourth would be fitness.
Very good.
All right, sir. Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon. I'm Hillary Gordon, and I'm the chair of the Zero Waste Committee for the Angeles chapter of the Sierra Club. I'm here representing our 40,000 members, but I'm also here speaking to you today as a resident of Council District Number 5. I want to urge you, as you implement the new franchise, to stay focused on measures to address truck efficiencies and vehicle miles traveled. I live in a neighborhood that's a mix of residential homes and multifamily buildings, and what you'll see if you come to my little neighborhood is, sadly, a representation of reality for too many residents across the city. From my apartment, you'll hear trucks every day, often multiple times a day, chugging down the street, idling, beeping, banging the cans as they pick them up. It's also a very narrow street, so as they come down the street, they are, paused for anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes, during which time passage on the street is absolutely impossible. It's not a question of trying to maneuver around. It is literally impossible to get down the street. At the same time, all of the blocks just to my south, single-family homes, all get the wonderful city service from Department of Sanitation 1 day a week, all within the space of an hour. The question for us has been, why do we have one system that makes sense for some of us and another system that doesn't make sense for the rest of us?
Great.
We're on our way to eliminating this disparity through this new program, giving a system to all Angelinos, one that makes sense. We applaud the plan to maximize and require routing efficiencies, requirements that bidders provide vehicle miles traveled or VMT plans, and requirements around real-time tracking via technology like GPS. These should be requirements for anyone doing waste and recycling in the city of Los Angeles in the 21st century. So please, please stay the course on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. One more time, Jason Mikau. Right here. Okay. Kobe King.
Thank you, council members. Kobe King, Econek, and thanks to reapportionment, now a proud member of CD 12. Other speakers have supported the 20-zone area. I won't repeat those policy arguments, which I think are quite persuasive. All I want to do is make the point that as the council, you have the opportunity to ask the department to include a 20-zone alternative in the EIR scoping. Doesn't require sanitation to throw out the work that they've already done. It just preserves flexibility for future councils as to whether or not they want to go with 11 or 20 or some other number, but if the Bureau doesn't study it, it makes it more difficult. Also, as to local preference, it certainly seems to me that businesses that have been in the City of Los Angeles, doing business in the City of Los Angeles, and will continue to do business in the City of Los Angeles appropriately would get some kind of a preference. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Jose Martinez, Jaime Garcia, Ann Williams, Reverend Bob Gay. And welcome.
Thank you, council members. My name is Jose Martinez from White Memorial Medical Center. As you may know, since 1913, we've been a safety net provider for the community of Boyle Heights and surrounding areas. We serve uninsured and underserved patients there. As such, we have financial challenges, but we still have high service standards and have to meet regulatory requirements. Our ongoing concern with this new program is that the administration of it seems complex, and we require assurances that our waste is going to be handled and disposed of in matters that meet regulatory rules. It is critical for us to retain the ability to choose our own haulers independently, as we have service requirements where the timing of picking up of waste at our facility is key, and it's not only a regulatory issue, but it's also a public safety concern, and it is a duty that our community expects of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and we're going to more fully discuss the exemptions at our next April meeting.
Thank you.
Jaime Garcia with the Hospital Association of Southern California. I want to thank you for today's hearing. As the Bureau staff continues to develop the content for the hospital section of its preliminary report, I would encourage staff to clarify why drop-off containers were exempted in certain locations and what not applicable means when you refer to whether certain sectors were exempted. This is important if the Hill survey is being used by staff as a basis to justify its recommendation to this joint committee. On the one hand, not applicable can be interpreted that exemptions simply were not provided to specific sectors, in this case hospitals. Or, as I discovered, exemptions to hospitals were not provided in at least one region given the lack of a hospital presence in that region. So as a result, I want to make sure that apples-to-apples comparison is being made given our exemption request, and that this will help avert unintended consequences that may prove harder to undo once this program is launched. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Williams with the Central City Association, and I've also been asked to speak today on behalf of VICA, the Valley Industry and Commerce Association. Los Angeles is blessed with a diverse economy, and an accountant office, a fish processing facility, and a downtown high-rise need access to very different types of trash service. It's critical that the city be mindful of this diversity and that it does not make waste sheds that are so large that they are unmanageable and that service levels suffer as a result. We believe that market competition is critical and there is a need in the marketplace for a wide variety of haulers. So as you define the parameters of the EIR, please include the alternative that studies the creation of 20 zones. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend?
Mr. Chairman, members, Robert Gay, or Bob Gay, with the clergy community, we have a couple of concerns. First of all, let me thank the President of the Board of Public Works for encouraging Ms. Coca and Mr. Myers to meet with a number of us. Last time I appeared before you, I asked you to create a working group that would assist the Board of Public Works and the Sanitation Department with some of the gaps that are in their program, some of which have been asked today. The clergy community, which includes all houses of worship, have not been asked to participate nor consulted on this issue. And so that's a huge gap. And so while studios and hospitals have been talked to, there's a larger group that hasn't been addressed. Second, there are convalescent homes, there are skilled nursing facilities, and there are community care groups that have also not been included in this group. And then there are very specifically neighborhoods whose languages are not English as a primary language, and there needs to be an outreach in those areas to include them and make sure that they are participants in this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If I could ask our departments and the board to please consult with the Reverend, and I know they've been meeting with a number of stakeholders, and they should do the same with the stakeholders brought up here. Great. Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I just want to recognize Mr. Gay. He and I were on Mayor Bradley's youth council.
All right.
When we were youth. So.
All right.
When our hair was black.
That's right. All right. It is.
Well, yours is whiter than his. What happened?
Oh, well, he prays more. God bless you, Bobby.
That's why I still have it.
Miley is our last speaker.
Thank you for having me here. Miley, representing the Midnight Mission, where we've been serving the downtown area for more than, almost 100 years. I want to just emphasize the importance of including nonprofits in this discussion. I also share the previous gentleman's sentiments that we were not included in this process. And I think to date, no one has met with the nonprofits in the Skid Row area. Some of you may not know, but last year the Midnight Mission served 1 million free meals last year. That's a lot of waste. This issue is very important to us, and it impacts us severely, given that we're a nonprofit and we are independently funded.
Thank you.
I think you need to be a little more specific about who you're talking about, because nonprofits are dentists and doctors and everything else. So are you talking about homeless service providers? Or
Specifically homeless providers. I mean, you have about 3 or 4 major
or
homeless
meal providers? Or
Yes.
if you could work with staff to hone in on what you're exactly trying to protect, I think it's a good idea, but nonprofits covers a wide variety of organizations.
Okay, I can narrow that down.
Thank you.
Specifically,
No, you can
homeless
do it with
providers.
staff.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, let's just direct staff. Mr. Nutter, if you as a commissioner and Enrique, one of your deputies, open up to the both, have an office meeting and get them part of the program, educate them, and see if there's ways to help them.
Thank you.
So if you guys could reach out to these two individuals, and it's timely because at our next April meeting, these are the types of issues we will bring up. So it's very timely time. Very timely time. That's repetitive. So thank you. Any other questions from my colleagues or comments? If not, I think we had a very good conversation. I again want to thank the staff. This is a lot of work, but I think we are on target with our timeline, and we'll see you in April. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
There's no public comment. Don't matter now.